Spags, joined today by the top DFS player in the world, the man whose name is on this very website that you are on right now, or at least the YouTube channel, Alex Baker, better known as Osmo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing well. Excited to break down this 2-game slate with you guys. I think it'll be really interesting because there aren't any guys that are very playable, in my opinion, that are going to be like super low owned. So I'm going to go over some strategies you can use to make your lineup a little bit more contrarian, other than kind of digging a little bit too deep.
Yeah, there you go. So that is something we will talk about a lot throughout this hour. And we are also joined by a Roto World senior editor, one of the smartest men in NFL analysis out there, Evan Silva. How are you doing, Evan?
Good, man. Just looking at my picture right now on this thing, like my Twitter picture is like from this summer, like from late this summer. I look freaking 25 years older than that after this NFL season. It's unbelievable.
Awesome has to start paying for hair and makeup for you and for all of us. I think that'd be good for all of our brands.
It's a long season, man. But I'm glad we're going all the way to the finish line on this show. You know, not all shows do that. We're here for the people.
We are here for the people. We are also here thanks to Fantasy Draft, one of our partners on this season who we really appreciate helping us out every week. We are sponsored by them. And of course, Fantasy Draft has lower contest fees than the other major providers out there. And they pay out a minimum of 25% of players. It's a great way to build your bankroll regardless of your skill level. So go check it out now. Use promo code Contrary. You get $5 free on your first deposit there. And freebies like these, again, are a great way to build your bankroll if you are a newer player, or if you just want to extend, try some new sites, get some less sharks into your waters. So go to fantasydraft.com now, download the app with promo code Contrary for $5. Alex, why would the people want to go to Fantasy Draft?
I think it's a great idea to play on as many sites as you can and kind of spread around your risk. You can actually risk more of your bankroll if you're playing on multiple sites because you have more independent results. You're not playing the same guys with the different salary structures. Fantasy Draft this weekend, they have this 20K run and gun tournament. And you can put down almost $1,000 on the slate. So if you're an intermediate player, a beginner player, you should definitely be playing on there. I think that it's a good idea because they're smaller fields, which makes it less risk, and you got to realize your edge quicker. So I think you should definitely look at their tournaments this week.
There you go. So try to find that edge wherever you can. Go to fantasydraft.com now, download the app, and use promo code Contrary for $5 free. All right, let's go to. We just have 2 games today, so we will go through them individually. The Rams currently projected for 27 points by Vegas. Actually, 26.8 if we want to be technical. New Orleans, a 3-point favorite, 29.8 projected points here. Ownership numbers looking heavier on the Saints side. Drew Brees at 28% on DraftKings. Alvin Kamara, 56%, a little over that. Michael Thomas, the chalkiest player projected on the slate at 63%. And on the Rams side, a little bit less ownership. Todd Gurley looking like the heaviest owned guy there. Robert Woods not far behind him. And Brandon Cooks rounding out the threesome there. Jared Goff lagging behind his teammates. Alex, let's talk a little bit about this here. The prices are down again for all these guys, I guess, in order to be able to cram in enough guys with these high-octane teams here. Which guys jump out to you from a price perspective here with all these guys looking like they can be very playable?
So I think as far as price, you can go to pretty much any game here. What I'm looking at as being an interesting play more than any other is the Rams passing offense. Jared Goff didn't really get to pass the ball a whole lot last week. They just ran the ball a ton. CJ Anderson had kind of an unexpected, amazing performance where I had him projected for 0 and he got like 30. So,
well, you say you want your projections to be wrong, right?
This week. So, but I think that, yeah. I didn't do very well on that showdown slate. I think CJ Anderson was like, first of all, he was like 7K on DraftKings, so it wasn't like he was 200 or something. And like only 2% of people have him, so that was a great time to be contrarian. But I wasn't contrarian enough on that one. But I think that Todd Gurley, the split between Todd Gurley and CJ Anderson was about as bad as he could get last week. Where CJ Anderson, he like ran it. I can't remember. The workload is about evenly split, but I would expect after another week of Todd Gurley being able to heal up, The workload is going to be slanted a little bit more towards Gurley this week. I'm still expecting C.J. Anderson to get some run, but if that's the way you're going contrarian, I'd be a little hesitant because you're banking on the fact that what's going to happen last week is going to repeat itself, and I don't think that's not likely to happen.
Okay. Also, Alex, you're breaking up a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying about the share shifting back to Gurley. But if there's any way, I guess, to move closer to the Wi-Fi modem or something, I don't know. But just in case, just so you're aware. Evan, on your side, what are you thinking about this game here? Alex is talking about the passing game offense and Gurley getting his lion's share of the carries back. What do you see this one breaking down here? The Rams obviously played New Orleans, had their first loss of the year a couple of weeks ago. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that game script, like trying to figure out what the game script is going to be and projecting it correctly is going to make a big, big difference, especially in the Rams backfield, because last week they ran 20 pass routes. C.J. Anderson ran 5. Since with Cooper Kupp out, since the bye week, the Rams have been a super run team. They've also been in a lot of favorable run-friendly situations. Are they going to go to the Superdome and be able to impose their will with the running game, against this, what has been an elite run defense? They lose Sheldon Rankins last week. That's a significant loss. I think that they have good bodies behind him to continue to be a very good run defense. But, can the Rams get a lead here? That would be significant for C.J. Anderson to remain a factor. If they fall behind, it's going to be more of a Todd Gurley game, and it could become – a Jared Goff and maybe even a Gerald Everett game. Because last took back over as the Rams' primary tight end after they finished the season with Gerald Everett in that role, because he's a superior blocker, and they roll with Tyler Higbee. Whereas if they fall behind, then Gerald Everett pops back up. Gerald Everett was a guy that a lot of people wanted to play last week, and that did not work out. He doesn't have a catch in either of the Rams' last 2 games. He's still really cheap. He's still a really good athlete, and he's still a guy that can become a factor if the game script, plays out to where the Rams are playing from behind. There really hasn't been very much movement on the spread at all. I mean, it's 3.5 everywhere you look, and then on the Saints, if the Saints can just kind of dominate the game, I think that Mark Ingram becomes interesting, especially on FanDuel, because he's only 6,100. He's less than C.J. Anderson on FanDuel. I think he's not priced as great on.
No, he's actually comparable. He's less than C.J. Anderson as well on DraftKings, 4,600 for Ingram and 5,000 for C.J.
All right, good, yeah. So if they can win this game by 2 scores, which this is the Saints at home. Not facing an imposing defense. If they can win this game by 2 scores, then I think that Mark Ingram comes into play as someone that, a lot of people don't want to play him, understandably. But if he scores a touchdown and gets 70 total yards, he could be kind of a difference maker at his price on this slate. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is, can we appropriately guess the game script? Do you guys have any just takes on the game itself? Because I think that's going to determine so much the way that the game goes.
Alex, what do you think about how the game goes? And Evan, I want to ask you one question too, just to tag back there about matchup. But Alex, give me your thoughts real fast on what do you think about how this game's going to break down? Is Alex there?
It's pretty hard to predict the game script, but we can go to the spread, which is about 3.5 or something. And the Rams are the underdogs, so that suggests that they're a little bit more likely to be the ones trying to catch up and a little bit less likely to be the ones kind of dominating the game. So I think that skews a little bit more towards the Rams' passing attack. As Evan mentioned, Gerald Everett is the main receiver out of the tight end position. Last week, Higbee got more snaps, but Gerald Everett still ran more routes. And I'm expecting Gerald Everett to be running routes on about half of the snaps this week. And there aren't a lot of good tight ends that are cheap this week. So Gerald Everett is definitely one of the easy guys to fit in at a low salary, so you can get in some expensive guys in your lineup.
Interesting. So I guess if we're playing
the other cheap tight ends are on the other side.
There's a bit of a delay, Alex. My bad.
I was gonna say Josh Hill and Benjamin Watson. Sorry, yeah, I think we're having some internet troubles, but Josh Hill and Benjamin Watson are the other tight end options that are cheap. The problem is New Orleans runs kind of a even split in their rotation. They threw in a third tight end last week, and I'm not really projecting these guys to be having any significant workload. They're just kind of touchdown dart throws.
So, Evan, if Alex thinks it's going to be a pass-heavy game, then I want to talk about a guy who would be a pass recipient on the Saints side. We were talking a little bit before we came on the air where I was considering Michael Thomas as being my fade of the week pick. I liked what I saw out of Aqib Talib last week. I thought he did a good job. I thought he looked as close to form as you could expect after missing so much. I thought the pass defense as well seemed like it shifted towards Gallup because they were better at covering Amari Cooper than I would have expected going in. I'm a little worried about Michael Thomas this week, and I think a lot of people were hyping up Ted Ginn last week. I think this could be the week where we see Ted Ginn explode and have the day that people thought he may have had in that last round. But tell me about this, the defense for the Rams with Aqib Talib back in, Evan. And do you think that it might inhibit Michael Thomas at all?
Well, Michael Thomas finished the regular season number 9 among all NFL wide receivers in yards gained in the slot. In these teams' week 6 meeting, was it week 6 or week 9? One of those.
Week 9.
Yeah, week 9. Michael Thomas went for over 200 yards. Over half of those yards were accrued in the slot. Aqib Talib has lined up in the slot on 4% of his snaps this year. And there are 2 kind of low-key significant injury situations to monitor here. Number 1, Kirkwood. We talked a little bit about it before the show. He missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday with a calf injury. Keith Kirkwood has been the Saints' primary slot receiver, actually ran more routes, played more snaps last week than Ted Ginn. He's kind of like a blocker in the middle of the field and just kind of like a big presence that they don't design plays to get the ball to Keith Kirkwood. But if he doesn't play, the next man up is Tre Quan Smith, who's a perimeter receiver. Tre Quan Smith, perimeter receiver, Ted Ginn, perimeter receiver. We see Michael Thomas, I think, play a ton of snaps in the slot in this game where he's 6'3". The Rams slot corner is 5'7", Nickel Robbie Coleman. Now, Nickel Robbie Coleman is awesome. That's why he's able to succeed at 5'7" in the NFL. But Michael Thomas has 8 inches on this dude. And Aqib Talib hasn't really gone into the slot at all. He also has not shadowed an opposing number 1 receiver in over 2 years. So I think that, just there are ways for the Saints to get Michael Thomas away from Aqib Talib. They should know that. They do know that. They've done this specifically, used Michael Thomas specifically more in the slot than usual, based on matchups. And he's awesome in the slot. Michael Thomas is a crazy mismatch in the slot. He led – actually, each of the last 2 years, he leads all NFL wide receivers in yards per route run from the slot, which is one of PFF's best and most predictive statistics. So I do think, though, that it's always a very interesting idea to fade, a guy who's coming off a monster game, who's going to have huge ownership, and especially on a small slate like this. And if we could just get him held to 6 catches for 86 yards or something, and you don't play him and you get big games elsewhere in your lineup, that alone, I think, gives you a significant advantage.
Yeah, that's sort of how I'm viewing it as well. Just the chalkiness, the people following him after the big game. Obviously, a little bit of regression to the mean there after having a 41% target share last week and so many targets, and he was just the vessel for everything they did. I do wonder here. I guess we've talked about game script, Evan. What would be the game script where Michael Thomas isn't as involved? It would be a run-heavy one, I would presume, with Kamara and then maybe Ingram salting it away, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in a lot of those scenarios, Michael Thomas is the reason that they get that big lead. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's a tough fade, but if you're going to be, good at game theory, which I'm not, Alsemo is, you guys are much better than me at that. But I mean, I think it's all about game theory, here. And in that scenario, you can justify not playing Michael Thomas. He's really expensive too, obviously. So taking off a significant portion of your salary cap, you can use that money elsewhere. And really all you need for him to be held to is a good game for a wide receiver. Like I said before, 6 catches for 86 yards, and you're kind of in business.
So, Alex, what do you think? What would be the game script in which Michael Thomas doesn't hit value or has that 6 for 86 game that Evan's mentioning? Who would be the beneficiaries on the Saints side? Delay get worse.
Alex, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. My general logic is that if you project him for like 8 catches and 90 yards or something, then there's a much better chance he does well on DraftKings than FanDuel, because on DraftKings, since Michael Thomas only gets like 11 yards per reception, about he gets a lot more points per play on DraftKings than FanDuel. If he ends up getting 80 yards and 7 catches on FanDuel, that's only 11.5 points, which for 8.5K is like really disappointing. But on DraftKings, it'd be more likely that he would be one of the top wide receivers in a 2-game slate with that score. So I think that we might be a little biased because he had a really hot game last week. But if he goes below his median projection, then you're looking at a situation where you're going to be in good shape. And if he's owned more than half the time, then that's not a gamble I'm unwilling to take.
Is there anybody you'd be willing to pivot to on New Orleans to try to capture that Vegas total? Like, let's say they still put up to 29.8 points, but Thomas isn't involved in a scoring perspective. Who would be the guys that you'd want the most if you're not playing Thomas?
The obvious one is Alvin Kamara. He's their other big fantasy producer. And then the other production I have is kind of spread out between Mark Ingram, Ted Ginn, and Keith Kirkwood. I wouldn't be crazy about like having Breeze without Thomas because I think that they're going to be highly correlated this week. But I think if you're projecting Thomas to have a bad week, you'd project New Orleans to hit the under as well. It'd be a little bit less likely to hit the over if he has a bad week.
Fair. You mentioned the Rams passing game as well, Alex. Obviously, we have a bunch of pass catchers there who can do things. We talked about the tight end. If you had to pick one between Woods and Cooks, or I assume you're not going to pick Josh Reynolds, but you can pick him too. Which guy would you be the one you'd be most inclined to pair with Goff?
Well, here's the thing: is the Saints give up over the season they've given up 0.3 yards more than average per play on the passing game, and they've allowed 4/10 of a yard less per rushing attempt. So I feel like the Rams will have more success passing the ball than running in general. And also the fact that they're underdogs makes me believe that they're going to be more likely to pass a lot more than 28 times than that they passed last week. As far as their passing game, the main targets are going to be Cooks, Woods, Reynolds, and Gurley. I think if you're picking Goff, you'd at least want one of Cooks and Woods, and then you might pick one or two of the other receivers. And it's going to be hard to predict exactly which one it is. It'll be kind of random each week, but that's a good strategy in general.
Evan, how about you? I'm more of a Cooks guy. I liked what he did earlier this year. We're obviously returning to New Orleans too. We have talked about revenge spots not being a thing in football, but Cooks I think just grades out well there with the turf and his speed. But Woods obviously has his benefits as well. Which guy do you feel like is the strongest play as a pass catcher for the Rams, Evan?
Woods. I think that Woods is always the strongest play. If you want to go for the lower owned, I think Cooks is going to be lower owned because we just really haven't seen him, have a really big game recently. He did have a touchdown called back last week or overturned on replay. in the Week 17 game, he did have 2 touchdowns, but hasn't really, but no one was really paying attention to that game. Hasn't had 100 yards, since before the Rams bye week. So I think he's going to be lower owned probably. I know he's cheaper on FanDuel. They're just different players and they're used differently. And it's real clear that Robert Woods always has the higher floor, and Cooks is kind of like the more volatile guy, So you just kind of, roll with those punches. That's just how they do. I would rather, if we're just going to go like straight at matchups, Robert Woods has the superior matchup in the slot against PJ Williams. Robert Woods running almost 80% of his routes in the slot. One of the biggest mistakes that the Eagles made last week was not throwing the ball in the middle of the field and attacking PJ Williams. They only went after him like twice all game. And, when you don't do optimal things, you lose football games. And so they deservedly lost. But I think that just the rapport that Goff has, and the way that they've excelled as a passing offense, I think it's very likely that we see, especially if they fall behind, like Robert Woods has double-digit target upside in this game.
Interesting. Yeah, so there's some thoughts on both sides there. We should talk about the defenses too, because obviously only 4 defenses to pick this week. And defense is a pretty variable position. Obviously, touchdowns can come anywhere. And this week in particular, you probably just want whoever can get a touchdown, and even if they give up a bunch of points. But which defense looks more appealing to you here, Alex? We have a Rams team who does a pretty good job pressuring a Saints team rather, who does a pretty good job pressuring the quarterback, and a Rams team who's given up the most sacks on the slate. And on the New Orleans side, I don't see a lot of reasons to love the Rams defense going against the Saints, but you tell me, Alex, which would you prefer?
I prefer the Saints just because Drew Brees throws so few interceptions. I have his interception rate at just over 1%. Jared Goff's is in the mid-2s, which is about average. And interceptions are a big way that you rack up points on defense. Sorry about that. So that's going to be the main difference maker there for me.
That was your alarm making us reminding you.
What was that alarm for? What was that alarm for, Austin?
Yeah, that was the alarm for my first contrarian pick.
Oh,
Andy Jones, trot him back up.
All right. It was actually an unrelated alarm, but I'll give you guys a nugget here. One tip I have for you in 2-game slates is that a lot of people are going to be avoiding offensive players versus team defense on the other side. The 2-game slate, I think a big way you get contrarian is you have at least 1 or 2 players facing the defense that you have. I think a lot of optimizers will kind of guide you against that kind of lineup construction. But on a 2-game slate, it's so random which defense is going to do well, and I don't think it's going to have that much correlation with the offensive production. Is going to be just kind of like which team has a fluky play. So I think that is a good strategy to your contrarian.
Bear with me on this take, okay? You ready for a take?
Oh, I can't wait now. Tavon Austin was really good for people last week.
Oh, Jesus.
I shouldn't do that. That's mean to do.
When Cole Beasley was active, hopefully you knew. Pull back a little bit on Tavon Awesome. But the Cowboys lost the game. No, they didn't use Tavon Awesome enough.
I'll give you that. They should have broken him out. At least one gadget play for Austin might have turned the tide completely.
Shoot, what were we talking about?
Defenses. You had a crazy take.
Yeah, it's not that crazy. Okay, so if your quarterback throws a pick 6 on the first drive, it's actually good for your quarterback, right? Because then he's starting to play from behind the entire game. Only costs you 1 point. Gets the ball right back, So pick 6s are good. Like they can be a positive driver of like volume in the passing game. So I think that it's very much. It's not necessarily something that I think we should be looking at all the time on regular season slates, but on a 4-team slate, 2-game slate. Absolutely, why not? I mean, you could play your quarterback against the defense. I don't see why you wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, if we had to guess which guy would come out with more butterflies and more fear and more apprehension that would lead to a pick six that would then need to be reined in, clearly that's Jared Goff. So yeah, I think the Saints defense is the play here. And I agree too. Like, I think a guy like Goff, if he gets shelled early and has that big play, McVay will rein him in and try to get him comfortable again. And that actually might end up being better off. So I don't hate that theory. Not a bad one.
I don't know, Chris, I have to go into some narratives here. Jared Goff being in LA, he's very much a part of that Hollywood culture. And I feel like the spotlight is always on him. So maybe he will be a little bit more game ready than you might expect.
That is a possibility. He is a popular man around LA to certain lady demographics, I've been told. So that all checks out. Yeah, no, I get it. I think he's ready for the bright lights. And I also think too, actually, Evan, tell me what you think about this theory. So I think we've seen it didn't play out quite as well for the Eagles, but the team facing a team who they lost to a couple weeks ago, it was something Bill Simmons talked about in his podcast today. It was something I was kind of ruminating on for this weekend. I kind of like the Rams and the Chiefs a little more for having taken that loss earlier in the year. Do you think there's any benefit to that, Evan, of seeing a team losing to them and kind of being able to adjust and maybe get stronger like the Chargers did versus the Ravens? I think is a good example.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like intuitively, but that's not like what the data says. 538 did something on this. When teams play in the regular season and then meet again in the conference championship games since 1990, 63% of the original regular season winners also win in the conference championship game. So
here's the reason why you should be a member of Awesemo.com and not 538 is that if the team that won is more likely to be the better team. So like say 60% of the time in the regular season, the favorite wins, then that team is going to also be more likely to win in the playoffs, barring significant changes in context.
Mind blown right here.
I also like that Evan came ready with that stat.
That was a good one.
It was not pre-prepared. Evan just had that ready to go.
I like that Awesemo is actively discouraging people from reading 538.
Well, we're trying to be the 538 of DFS, so I got to give them some credit. But their sports section, I don't think they're the best in the market.
All right. Yeah, obviously you are with the best in the market right now. Clearly couldn't be any better. But yeah, that was more of a self-effacing comment just for the record. But yeah, anything overall, I guess, with this game that you guys went ahead on, Alex, anything that we didn't touch before we move on to the AFC Championship?
One thing, Keith Kirkwood got a lot of snaps in the game, more than I was expecting. I think he ran routes on about 3/4 of the passing plays. So I think that he's one of the guys that's not a household name that's playable, and I think that's a good way to mix it up.
He does sound like a televangelist on a Sunday on public access or something. So yeah, the name Keith Kirkwood. Let's move on. Actually, before we move on to the next game, make sure to hit this video with a like and leave a comment if you're watching this after the fact. A lot of people, we record this live. There is a live chat going, which we're keeping an eye on. But if you're watching this after the fact to prepare for the slate, hit us with a like. Leave us a comment as well, giving us your fade of the week. Because obviously you got to choose wisely here. Maybe it's Michael Thomas if you're trying to be brave. But tell us who you're fading this week in the comments. We're curious to know. And I'm not giving you anything for it, but just do it. Let's talk about the AFC Championship game.
Hey, we should mention one more thing, okay?
Yep.
So, again, Keith Kirkwood was DNP calf injury Wednesday and Thursday. Okay, that is an actual injury situation to monitor. Last week we had Cole Beasley, we had Blake Jarwin, et cetera. Got to monitor the injury issues. This week we have Keith Kirkwood. We also have Ben Watson. Now, Ben Watson has been out with an illness. Players almost never miss with an illness. But on the off chance that Ben Watson does miss, I think that Josh Hill becomes pretty interesting. First of all, Josh Hill ran 20 routes to Ben Watson 16 last week. He's been getting more targets than Ben Watson recently. When these teams played in Week 9, Josh Hill played his highest percentage of snaps all season. He played 78%. So there may be something there that the Saints see in terms of like personnel package. They like Josh Hill, like the way that he matches up against the Rams or whatever. And he's gotten some opportunities last week, kind of missed them last week. But he's also a really good athlete. They've never used him very much in the passing game ever. He's primarily a blocking tight end, but I think that, maybe we could get some more routes out of him, maybe a couple more targets if Ben Watson does not play. I think Ben Watson is going to play, but, there's that small chance that he doesn't based on DNPs on back-to-back days.
There you go. And the cheap tight ends are people to consider. And obviously we'll talk about the higher price guys now in the AFC Championship game, in which New England, 26.3 points projected by Las Vegas. Going into Kansas City, 3-point favorites, 29.3 points projected for them. Pat Mahomes, the chalkiest quarterback on the slate on DraftKings, and I presume on FanDuel as well, but I don't have that in front of me. 33% projected ownership on DraftKings. Damian Williams, also one of the chalkier running back plays, not as chalky as Kamara, but right there with Todd Gurley and a little bit ahead of James White. Tyree has some good ownership on him, as does Travis Kelce. Almost half the field will be on both of those guys, according to our projections at Awesemo.com, which you can get 50% off of with promo code Contrary on there. I guess NFL season might be tough, but getting all sport pass, get 50% off of your first month. And on New England's side, not any ownership at all on Tom Brady. Ooh, boy, under 20% projected ownership for the GOAT. And Edelman, some ownership, 44%. Gronk, not much as well. Alex, price points here. Anybody here jumping out as potentially a value play?
Yeah, I think the Patriots have a couple of the kind of dart throw value plays that you can go to this week. There aren't many of them, but two I like as pretty playable are Chris Hogan and Philip Dorset. The only thing is I don't think they are like super cheap. So the lineup construction that I'm getting to, like I'm not ending up with a lot of them. One exception, I guess Chris Hogan on FanDuel, 5,200. That's pretty close to the minimum. So I think that punting one of the wide receivers is good. I think that FanDuel kind of skews towards running backs with the half PPR, and this is a week with a ton of good running backs. So that'd be kind of my take on the Patriots rotation.
Evan, what are you thinking about the Patriots side, and what do you think about Sony Michel last week? 25 touches overall. Monster game there, obviously going against the Kansas City team who's been bad versus the rush all year. And he's also projected for just 22% ownership on DraftKings, so a lot of people seem like they're not buying in here. What do you think about Michel's prospects going into Kansas City?
Yeah, he was huge in these teams' first meeting too. He had 24 carries for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. You're not going to get anything in the passing game. Last week he had a catch. It was like, whoa. Catch for like 8 yards. It was like, wow, man. It was awesome. God, I love what they did with James White. He had 0 running attempts and 15 catches. Like, I love the Patriots because they'll just do something over and over and over again until you show that you can stop it. If you can't stop it, they're going to do it, until the game's over. So, and I think that they could take a similar game plan here because in order to offset the Chiefs' pass rush, the Chiefs led the NFL in sacks. They had 3 more last week. Their pass rush was even more potent at home. 34 of their 55 sacks have occurred in home games this year. In order to offset that, a good way to combat that is to get the ball out of Tom Brady's hands quickly, throw a lot of short passes to James White, Julian Edelman, et cetera, just like we saw last week. And they did a great job of combining that with the power running game and with Sony Michel. And you can run on the Chiefs. They did it in the first meeting. And the Chiefs, they've given up over 5 yards per carry on the season. And you can also hurt them in the receiving game with running backs. They gave up a ton of production over the course of the year. To receiving backs, the Colts last week didn't throw a single pass to a running back. I mean, Frank Reich's game plan last week was a little disappointing, to say the least. And I know that Luck did not play well, and they didn't even run very many offensive plays until the end and all that. But they did not make good use of that opportunity. The Patriots are great at that. They don't make poor use of opportunities. They're going to go right after your weaknesses, and they're going to avoid your strengths. And the way that you avoid the strength of the Chiefs defense is to get the ball out quickly with short passes. When these teams played in week 6, Tom Brady got the ball out in 2.3 seconds. His season average is over 2.4 seconds. So that's the way that they attacked him. I think that they'll probably do the same thing. Why wouldn't they? They scored 43 points in that game.
So then does that break out to you to be a James White game or a Julian Edelman game then? Because those would be the short targets I would assume you'd want to go to.
Absolutely. Kendall Fuller, the Chiefs slot corner, has not been as good recently. Again, James White, he's so damn expensive on FanDuel. He's almost unplayable on FanDuel, like with how expensive he is. But and then Sony Michel is going to come down to game script and getting fortunate chances down near the goal line. I think he got one last week. There was a DPI, I think, called right down near the goal line, and he executed. That was one of his 3 touchdowns. He certainly got fortunate. But, if the Patriots can grab a lead, like, they're going to pound you with – they've got 2 tight ends that can block, Dwayne Allen and Gronk. They've got, an all-pro fullback in James Devlin. They have, according to Football Outsiders, the number 3 run-blocking offensive line in the NFL. They have this rookie running back that they love to feed. Since their bye week, he's averaging 19 touches per game. And it sounds like he's going to have low ownership. Man, he's an awesome tournament play.
Alex, what do you think about – take me through the running backs first with White and Michel. Which of those guys do you feel is a little better play this week?
Man, that's a tough one. I think that James White is probably a better fantasy player overall because, well, especially on DraftKings with PPR, he's getting a ton of catches. I think that Kansas City, their defense gives up a little bit more in run game than pass game relative to average teams, but they're not very strong on both. The way I'm expecting this game to go is the Patriots to sustain a lot of longer drives. The Kansas City Chiefs give up the most plays per drive in the NFL over the season. So I'm expecting the Patriots to take advantage of that by throwing a lot of underneath passes like we saw last week. Just racking up some mid-yardage plays throughout the game. And I like how that bodes for White. As for Michel, it's all going to be about, does he get a touchdown or not? Because even if you rush for 100 yards and you don't get a touchdown, that doesn't do that much for you in fantasy. So I think because Michel had such a big game last week, I'd be a little bit more tempted to fade him and play White. Just kind of White also had a great game too, but I think the recency bias will lead a little bit more. People overestimate Michel's value in fantasy, not taking into account how little he does in the passing game and how important that is.
Man, somebody didn't play Sony Michel last week.
I didn't either, so I'm trying to hide my contempt this week.
Also,
it all makes sense. Like he doesn't get passes. Like you're right. That one catch he had, I was like, it was early in the game, so it looked like, oh no, is he going to start getting catches too? Then it would have been even worse.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it didn't work out that way. But let's talk about the pass attack real fast because as I mentioned, Tom Brady projected for 17% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I'll check that while we talk. But overall, looks like very underowned to me considering the fact that the Chiefs give up over 400 yards a game. As Alex mentioned, a ton of plays per drive. We saw Brady doesn't have to throw it deep at all to get a ton of value coming back his way. Not a lot of ownership on Brady on FanDuel either, 16%. Alex, Tom Brady here, he seems like a nice contrarian play, and that is what the show is about. What do you think about Brady?
Yeah, the thing is, all the factors seem to be good, but just I'm not ending up with a lot of him when I'm running crunches. I guess I would still have him as the 4th best quarterback. I think that all 4 quarterbacks are really good, though, so it's anyone's guess who's going to be the best one of the week. The Patriots have the lowest team total, but it's 26, which is really high, in NFL terms. It's only 4 points lower than the top. So I think that although Brady's a little bit lower owned, he's not super contrarian, but I think that he could be a pretty nice play despite that.
What about his boy Gronk there, who's also pretty low owned, 22% projected ownership on DraftKings, which would put him on about half the ownership of Travis Kelce. It's a nice DVOA matchup versus tight ends here versus Kansas City. And, Gronk had a bad week last week. People were trying to tout him a little bit, even though the Chargers were very good against tight ends. And obviously Gronk not getting a ton of separation this year. How do you feel about Gronk's prospects here, Alex, for this week? Maybe a bounce back.
I definitely think he's a good play. The tight end position is pretty thin, with him and Kelce being the only real like tight end threats on the four teams. What I liked last week is that Gronk played almost every snap. He ran more routes than I was expecting. He didn't pass block a ton. I'm kind of nervous from what Evan's saying that the Chiefs get the most sacks in the NFL, because that makes me think that maybe Gronk will be pass blocking a little bit more and not running routes. But I think that I'm willing to take that risk.
Evan, how do you feel about Gronk here? Is he going to be held into pass block, or does he actually have a shot at a big day?
He also could be like a chipper, where he'll just like bump a dude and then go out into his route, so he could kind of accomplish both of those tasks in that way. He's really interesting because his ownership is going to be a lot lower than Kelce's, and you guys have actual data on that, but that's a strong assumption, I think, by me. And he also, and he's so much cheaper. I mean, his price has really come down on FanDuel. I mean, he's almost like $2,000 cheaper, I think, than Travis Kelce. If he somehow outscores Kelce, Kelce hasn't gone over 61 yards in 3 straight games against the Patriots. They've double teamed the crap out of him. If he somehow can score, go for 50 yards, 55 yards and a touchdown, and the Patriots hold, let's say, Kelce to 70 yards and no touchdowns, that you would have a huge edge on the field, in that scenario. I think it's still pretty unlikely because Gronk has, I think he's probably a better blocker than pass catcher at this stage, but the game has a high total. The Patriots are projected to play from behind. His ownership is going to be low. Everyone's down on him. The matchup is really, really good on paper, as you mentioned, Spags. And, like Osimo said, he's not coming off the field. He's going to be out there. So, could he catch a couple of red zone touchdowns? Man, that would be awesome if you played him and that happened.
Yeah, I would agree there. And on the other side, we have Travis Kelce, like Evan mentioned, who is projected to be the highest owned player on FanDuel this week, with over 52% of people expected to have him. So he is actually both double the field on both sites, on both DraftKings and FanDuel. He's twice the ownership projected as Gronk. So some possible leverage there. But Evan talked about Kelce. Alex, give me your thoughts on Kelce here. I'm intrigued by Kelce, obviously, but I think there's some concerns. Well, the one thing that jumps out to me, though, is like Evan mentioned, you could see Kelce have a 15-point day and maybe no other tight end breaks 5. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not crazy to think that way. How do you feel about Kelce, Alex?
I think Kelce is the odds-on favorite to be the top-scoring tight end at the end of the day, but I don't necessarily think that means you have to play him, because it's going to be all about which expensive guys do the best, because you can only fit so many in your roster. If you take Kelce, then it's going to be really hard for you to get Gurley or Kamara, or you can probably get one of them, but you can't probably get all the guys that you want to get. Thomas, Cooks, Woods. I mean, these guys are all having shots to have fantasy performances higher than him. So I wouldn't necessarily just take into account the gap in tight end itself. But I do think another strategy that I like is going double tight end. I think that makes your lineup a little bit more contrarian. And I think one thing I see as being kind of a contrarian strategy is you get Gerald Everett and Josh Hill or Benjamin Watson. And then you're spending way more at the skill positions than everyone else. And that gives you kind of a contrarian roster construction. If you get touchdowns on both tight ends, then you're in good shape.
Interesting. Tell me about this pass attack for Kansas City, Evan, what you think about Pat Mahomes' prospects here. Obviously, he had a monster game at New England a couple weeks ago or whatever, a month ago. Looked great there. But New England is going to clamp down here, and we saw what they can do defensively, wreaking a lot of havoc versus the Chargers until they kind of figured things out and at least put up some garbage time points. Is there any concern here for Mahomes going against the Patriots?
A little bit. I think there is. I mean, if you just isolate his production from weeks 1 through 11, and we still all think of him as, this big, indefensible beast, and he is. I mean, he's deserving of NFL MVP, everything. He's I think he's the best quarterback in the NFL, but he wasn't as dominant after that Rams game as he was in the first, in weeks 1 through 11. He averaged 9.6 yards per pass, 9.3 yards per pass attempt in weeks 1 through 11. Ever since, he's at 7.6 yards per pass attempt. When he has played games in suboptimal weather, in under 30 degrees weather, and he's only played 3 in his entire college and NFL career. One of them was last year, or the year before last. In 2017, he played a Week 17 game where he was playing with backups. It was like a preseason game against the Broncos. We got a look at a skill set, which was fun, but that didn't really count. And then because the Chiefs had they had nothing to play for in that Week 17 game. And then we had 2 games this year. He played against the Ravens. Now they have a very good defense, but he averaged 7.1 yards per pass attempt, well below his season average, 4th lowest pass attempt that he posted all season. And then he had his lowest yards per pass attempt last week in 30-degree weather at Arrowhead against the Colts, who I think have an underrated pass defense. But it wasn't his best game. I mean, he missed a few throws during the game. He just hasn't been as dominant as he was early in the season. He's going up against the greatest game plan defensive coach of all time. He's facing a very talented Patriots secondary. And, there are some ways that he doesn't get there. He was a bust last week. I mean, in fantasy, he was a bust. And some of that was just bad luck because, they scored, they scored 4 touchdowns and all of them were rushing. He did get 1. But I mean, he made some fun plays, but he did not light it up. And he really hasn't been lighting it up aside from the Week 17 game against the Raiders at home. He hasn't lit it up like he did earlier in the season. He does have a full deck now, though. I mean, he's got Sammy Watkins, who I thought looked good last week. Tyree is healthy. He battled some injuries late in the season. Obviously, Kelce's a beast. But I think that there are some ways that he can kind of disappoint in this game.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's also something I feel like to know, and Evan, if you want to confirm, but I've heard reports, or at least seen some people who are smart talking about it, where they're assuming the Patriots are going to put a spy on Mahomes, which I would assume would cut into his rushing upside decent, especially given how dedicated the Patriots spies could be relative to some other teams' QB spies. But do you think that's a viable approach here for the Patriots, and will it kind of cut into Mahomes' rushing upside a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what they're going to do is try to keep him in the pocket so he's not making those where he just rolls out to the side and just unleashes a bomb. You want to prevent that from happening, and they're going to try to confuse him with fake blitzes where it looks like a guy is blitzing and then he'll actually end up dropping into coverage. I think that they're going to continue to what they did against Kelce earlier in the season. Look, they've held Kelce in check in 3 straight games now. Using double teams with linebackers and safeties and hitting him at the offensive line with edge rushers. And then they just stuck Stephon Gilmore one-on-one with Sammy Watkins, held him to 2 catches earlier in the season. But they gave up 40 points. I mean, the Chiefs scored 40 points in that game. So maybe they'll switch things up. It's a very intriguing tactical game. It's not easy to predict. I feel a little bit more confidence about the Saints-Rams game than I do this one. It's like a true chess match, and I think that it's there's a reason that the spread is only 3 and it's not moving.
Alex, what do you think about Mahomes here? Obviously, the chalkiest play, the most expensive play, and some of the concerns that I haven't mentioned are very real, but the upside is very real for him as well. What do you think?
I'm a little bit less bullish on him than the sports books I saw. I saw some props of 315 passing yards. I think that's way too high. I think that they're going to be having a little bit of trouble sustaining drives in comparison to the Patriots. I'm a little worried they're going to not run as many plays, but they do have a lot of explosive offense, which means they're going to have drives where they're going to go the whole field and not that many plays. So I think that it's more of a boomer bust kind of thing. I really like that Sammy Watkins is back. He played most of the snaps last week. So I don't think his injury is much of a concern. And I'm not as big on the whole Bill Belichick kind of taking away an option. I think that at this stage of the game, teams kind of reach an equilibrium. Whereas if any of you guys have played poker, it's kind of like you can't do one thing too much because then the player adapts and they'll do something else with more success. So the problem is if you shift your defense to overload on Kelce, that's making every other player more appealing for Mahomes, and I think he's a good enough quarterback to kind of figure out the inefficiencies. So I think that if they're going to take away Kelce, I mean, they still got to worry about Watkins, Tyreek Hill, and then Damian Williams is also a threat in the passing game. So I'm not really expecting that to be a huge factor. But I'm not like huge on the team's success as a whole. I think that they don't have that much better shot compared to other teams. So I'm not. I would take the under on the 315 for sure.
So you mentioned that there might be some attention then shifted around if we're correct in that Kelce might be doubled or might be covered more with more attention than some of the other guys. Tyreek Hill did go off versus this Patriots team earlier in the year in that meeting that we talked about. 7 catches for 142 yards and 3 scores. Obviously, the 3 scores part seems like it'd be tough for him to recreate here, but speed-wise, like I don't know if there's anybody in the Patriots secondary who could match up with him. But Alex, how are you feeling about Hill's prospects then if we are saying that, maybe there's not going to be as much attention dedicated to Kelce?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an explosive player. Gets a ton of deep passes, and I think that's great for fantasy if he's low-owned. If he's high-owned, then he's too much of a boom or bust play. But from what I've seen, he's not going to be like incredibly high-owned. But given my concerns about the Chiefs as a whole, I'm not sure he's my favorite. I prefer Michael Thomas and Cooks and Woods in general as plays over Hill this week. Just because I feel like the Rams are going to have to pass a little bit more. And then Michael Thomas, he just gets more yards per game on average. So I think he'd be 4th on my list.
Evan, how are you feeling about Hill? Are you bullish on him, or are you more on Alex's side of maybe thinking he's not as good of a player as some of the other dudes?
Yeah, so because they devoted so much attention to Kelce in the last couple of games, and because they put their best cornerback on Watkins, Tyreek Hill's crushed him in back-to-back games, and it goes to Osimo's point. Like, the Chiefs beat up on the Patriots in the 2017 meeting, week 1. It was a Thursday night game. It was the NFL opener. A lot of people probably remember it. Kareem Hunt just went off. He lost a fumble like early in the game, and it was like, oh man, we're never going to see Kareem Hunt again. He just had an unbelievable game, and it went on to lead the NFL in rushing. But yeah, I mean, Tyreek Hill has crushed him in back-to-back games. He had 7 for 133 and a touchdown in the first game. And then earlier this year, he had 7 for 142 and 3 touchdowns. So they need to come up with a better plan against Tyreek Hill. I think we can all agree on that. But it's, I think he's an awesome play. It's just, a matter of, can you fit him into your lineup?
Does it make sense to pivot to Watkins then if we think that there may be some adjustments to correct the failures they've had with Hill, and Watkins maybe he won't see Gilmore, maybe he'll see whatever the weaker of the secondary options are?
I just think that Tyree can just run by Gilmore too, so I don't know, man. It's going to be a high-scoring game. Every reason to think Tyreek Hill is going to ball out.
Alex, what do you think about Watkins?
Oh man, I was kind of tilted last week because I was really bullish on him. I saw that Kelvin Benjamin was inactive, and I thought that meant they were like more secure of Watkins' health, so I gave him a bump. I guess they did end up having 4 wide receivers because they had Garrett, Dieter, and on the rotation a little bit. But Sammy Watkins, He played almost all the snaps, and then he even got a goal line carry, I think, and he got some more pass attempts in the red zone. So I think that all the signs are pointing go. In games that he's been fully healthy, I think he's averaged about 60 yards per game, which places him in a pretty good spot, not being top price, but having pretty good production overall.
And we mentioned him briefly, but Damian Williams, obviously a key part, expected to be one of the most popular plays on the slate. Last week was just stellar versus the Colts. Had a ton of touches, had a ton of success as well. Alex, any reason at all to get off the Damian Williams train here?
I think that the Chiefs aren't going to run as much as they did last week on average. They had a big lead in that game. But Damian Williams is still a great player. Spencer Ware practiced full, so I'm expecting him to be the second back. I think the expectation is that Williams will be the lead back, Ware will revert to his role when Kareem Hunt was the lead back and see some passing work, see a couple rushes. But there's a potential that we have it wrong, and the Chiefs are more bullish on Ware than we realize, and that he takes more of a share. But it's hard to plan for that in DFS. I guess you could have Ware in a couple of lineups as a super contrarian play.
Evan, what do you think about Damian Williams here, and any concerns at all about the Ware problem coming back into the lineup?
Oh man, I feel like we've been dealing with this potential Ware problem for like months.
It's been a popular topic here.
He never plays, he never plays. Hasn't played since week 14. I think if he does jump in, like Damian Williams has just earned this. He's earned this. And they gave him a contract extension. And, he got, 30 touches last week. Like, I don't know. I mean, look, we saw what happened last week with CJ Anderson. Osimo projects him for 0. He goes for 30. So crazy shit can happen, no question. But, I mean, to me, Damian Williams is like maybe – the best running back play on the entire slate.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree there. I think the concern would be just the Patriots shut things down enough where he doesn't get enough opportunity there, and Mahomes is just passing more and not to him. I guess this ties into the last question for this game then. Which defense would you be more comfortable playing? Obviously, we only have 4 on the slate. Got to choose one. Alex, which defense would you be more okay with rostering and which has some more upside?
I actually like both of the defenses. The big problem with the Chiefs defense is that Brady doesn't throw picks very often, but as Evan mentioned, they get the most sacks in the league. None of the defenses are particularly great. Mahomes throws about average interceptions, so that's the reason why you could go to the Patriots.
Evan, which defense would you go with?
Whichever one's cheaper.
Yeah, that would be New England. I think New England's an interesting defensive play here because if you were to make a bet, I mean, I buy into the Belichick game planning thing as much as anybody. And, if there were a defense here who's going to shut a team down and make them look out of their depth, like on this slate, I think the Patriots are the defense who can do that potentially, whether they have the horses to pull that off or not. But from a game planning perspective, Belichick versus Reed, not a great Andy Reid as a matchup. I don't know. Anything else, Alex, you want to touch on in this game before we do the fade of the week and contrarian picks?
Let me just take a look here. Rex Burkhead, we mentioned him last week. He ended up getting less, not very much work, but he got there on a touchdown. I'll try to avoid him this week. I think that people might be overly bullish on him. I think one really contrarian play would be Cordarrelle Patterson, but he doesn't have enough production on average to really justify playing him in a classic mode tournament. But in single game or showdown, I think he might be one of the salary saver plays.
All right, let's go to the contrarian picks first. Contrarian QB, I guess. Oh, is there really a contrarian QB? Just a QB that you feel good about, or the best about relative to the field? Let's say that. Alex, who would it be?
I like Jared Goff. I've been on him all the time, and he hasn't paid it off yet. I'm going to keep riding this till the end of the season. Fortunately, the end of the season isn't that far away, so I can't really say much. So I think I like the fact that the Saints give up more passing yards per play than an average team. And I like the fact that the Rams are a dog because I don't think we're going to see a repeat of last week where they just ran the ball 35 times.
Evan, how about you? Which quarterback do you feel most comfortable with relative to the field?
Taysom Hill, who's like a playmaker. No, I'm kidding. No.
Look, the Josh Allen of the Saints offense, who somebody tweeted us about that. I am not on Taysom Hill either, by the way. But if Drew Brees gets hurt in that first drive, could be a big Taysom Hill day.
Taysom Hill has had some month. If you play preseason DFS,
I have not played him in that, but that sounds like a spot where he would thrive.
I don't know. It's so hard. I'm going to go with Drew Brees at home at the Superdome against a Rams defense that I don't have very much respect for the Rams defense. Love the Saints offensive line. Love Michael Thomas. Love Ted Ginn to bounce back. After they missed him. He missed him last week, unfortunately. Love Kamara to make some plays in the passing game in this one. So I'm going to go with Drew Brees.
And I said it before, I'm going to go with Tom Brady here. It's maybe not enough of a contrarian option given that Jared Goff's just 4% more, but I think we have a quarterback who's clearly motivated by his post-game interview, which he's talking about people thinking they suck, which I don't think anybody's actually said, but they're trying to drum up some nobody believes in us stuff with this bet against us meme that they're putting on social media. It's a very obnoxious and tone deaf for the Patriots overall, but I think they're coming out motivated. I think Brady really wants to prove a point here. So I'll take a little narrative and a little bit of the greatest quarterback of all time and nobody wants to play.
Well, the problem is that it's hard to prove that narrative if they do in fact suck.
That's true. If they suck and get dusted here, I would be surprised, but it would be kind of funny. So either way, it's a win-win. I'm emotionally hedging then with the Patriots' failure or success. What about a contrarian, not a contrarian running back, but the running back you're the most comfortable with, Alex?
I think that Todd Gurley is pretty interesting. If he has the same workload as last week, he'll be kind of disappointing. But there's a chance that they change the game plan and C.J. Anderson's out of the rotation. And if that happens, you're going to be loving your shares. So I like going to him.
Evan, how about you? Which running back are you the most comfortable with?
Probably Damian Williams. It's neck and neck between Damian Williams and Alvin Kamara. But I'm going to go with Damian Williams.
I'm going to go James White just because I think he's going to get a lot of targets again. I don't think the Chiefs are good at any way to stop him. I'm comfortable with him getting an opportunity, whether the Chiefs are playing ahead or whether the Patriots are ahead. I think either way he's going to be a part of that situation. So James White will be my dude. Wide receiver, Alex, who's the one that you're comfortable with at wide receiver?
So I got to go with Sammy Watkins. We're projecting him for 24% ownership. I think my ownership is going to be at least double that. I think that he showed that he's fully healthy, and so far this year, that's meant big production for him. He's not a lock at all, but given the fact that only a quarter of the field is on him, I think that he's a pretty good bet.
Evan, how about you, wide receiver?
How about the best wide receiver on the slate, Michael Thomas?
Yeah, that is a pick. If you're most comfortable with him, that's fair. He is.
That has to be the answer, right? The thing is that this is the On the Contrary show. So, let's do this because I think that Tyree Hill and Michael Thomas are real close, right? So, what is the projected ownership between those two? And is it a sizable enough edge to like pivot to Tyreek Hill?
So on FanDuel, Thomas is 51% and Tyreek Hill is projected to be at 39.7%. And on DK, Michael Thomas projected for 62.6% and Tyreek Hill projected for 48.7%. So comparable difference between the two.
Yep.
All right, Tyreek Hill. I was going to go Sammy Watkins, but I'll let the boss man have him. I'm not comfortable with Ted Ginn, so this is more of a contrarian pick, but Ted Ginn would be the guy I want. I like the bounce back spot here. And again, just a lot of people were touting him last week. The ownership wasn't necessarily huge, but I just think it's going to grade out well. I think the Rams are going to have to dedicate more attention to Thomas, even if they can't defend the slot. think it's going to open up enough for Ted Ginn to do one of his big Ted Ginn things. And hopefully he doesn't alligator arm it. That's all we can hope out of Ted Ginn. Alex, what would be your fade of the week?
A fade of the week. I'm a little less bullish on the Chiefs in general. So I'm sure I'll have them in lineups, but they won't be in every lineup. Does that constitute a fade?
I would prefer you pick a player.
All right. Well, of the Chiefs players, let's see.
Go Big Pat. Cut off the snake
Fade
by the head.
MVP. Fade the MVP.
Yeah, fade the MVP, man. I think he's got as good a shot to be the best quarterback of the week, but not better. And when he's owned by a third of the field, I think you can gain some leverage by not having him.
All right, so no funny Patrick Mahomes hair thing. You're not going to have that on next week. Actually, you should find a way to get that and wear that for the Super Bowl edition if Patrick Mahomes does have a big day.
Well, I mean, I feel like we're due to make another bet after that power hour, but I think it's got to be between you and Evan.
But I think people would love to see you with the Patrick Mahomes hair. I think Jason Whitlock did it on Fox Sports 1 this week. Went viral. Maybe we go viral if it's just you sitting here in Patrick Mahomes hair for an hour.
And you got to do the whole show trying to talk like Kermit the Frog.
He does have a strange voice for an elite athlete. He needs some macaroni and cheese with ketchup. Evan, what about you? Fade of the week?
Oh man, I'm gonna go with fade Jared Goff. I just has not played well. You know, I like to go head to head with Osimo. You know, I'm 1-0 all time. So I'm trying to double up. Just Jared Goff he's gone over 220 passing yards one time in his last 6 games. He's been really bad under pressure. Saints have been very good at getting pressure, especially at the Superdome. I think that Sean McVay has been trying to hide Jared Goff. That's why you see their massive run game splits down the stretch. Just has not looked comfortable since Cooper Kupp went out of the lineup. With Cooper Kupp out, he has like pretty drastic splits. He's also been really bad on the road this year. 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So just a lot of factors I think working against Jared Goff.
So I've been convinced by you guys to not go with Michael Thomas as the fade. I think our conversation and the box score watching that people will do when they're making their rosters is making me want to fade Tyree Hill. 2 big games there. I think there have to be some adjustments by the Patriots to at least limit him a little bit more. People will be on him. I think Kelce might have a down day as well, but at least he'll be probably the top scoring tight end almost regardless of outcome. So I think it's going to be Tyree Hill for me, and this is a tough one. These championship slates are not the most fun in terms of being contrarian.
If Tyreek and Kelce have down games, Mahomes probably isn't having a big game, is he?
He could do one of his weird throw one to Harris, throw one to Conley, throw 2 to Watkins days.
Runs one in.
Yeah. There's too many ways it could break for him where I think he could still have a decent day. And if we are right, and let's say like there are parts of the offense that suffer here, if you had Mahomes with somebody who was weird, you're probably going to be very different from the field if Mahomes does have a big day without those two. So,
we didn't talk about Chris Hogan.
Yeah, Alex mentioned him briefly, but if you have any thoughts on him, jump in.
Well, I just wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, I kind of like his price. He's going to be out there a ton. We know that. It just hasn't worked all year. He has 10 red zone targets. Only one of them has been caught for a touchdown on the year. But just him being out there so much, a little bit tempting when you can play him for cheap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think he and Dorset. I think Alex said that they make sense to have some exposure to if it works for you. Or I don't want to put words in Alex's mouth, but I think like at their prices, they are certainly 2 value guys who jump out alongside Watkins. Alex, I guess how would you handle Hogan and Dorset? Like just a little taste of them?
I think they're 2 very different plays. Hogan, he's been on the field all the time. The problem is he doesn't get targeted very much when he runs routes. He's been super successful when he has. On the season, he caught 63% of his passes, average of 15 yards. That's incredible, like production per target. But there's no scenario where you can really project him for a lot of targets. Dorset, on the other hand, is a little bit more interesting. The production per play isn't as good, but he gets targeted a lot more. He runs short routes, gets a high percentage of them, and he's only on the field about half the time. What could happen is if one of the other wide receivers goes out, then all of a sudden Dorset is twice as productive, whereas with any other player, I can't really say the same.
All right, so there we go. That's everything. Alex, any words you want to hit before anything you want to hit on, rather, before the parting words?
I feel like I gotta give something now that you asked the question here.
You could just also say bye. You could say like any give a gracious good luck and farewell.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying before that. All right. Well, just thanks everyone for watching. I think the trick this week to be contrarian is to get combinations of players that might not be together that often in other people's lineups. Doing things like double tight end and the flex, stacking players against your defense. I think those are some interesting ways to do it. One thing I recommend against is going for super contrarian plays like Cordarrelle Patterson. There's just not enough bang for your buck. And I'm not sure that you need to go that deep this week. There's a lot of viable players. So that'll be my advice. It's been great doing another postseason breakdown. It's always fun trying to dig deep for the contrarian plays, and it'll be even more fun for Super Bowl, where we get players at $200 that we can go for.
There we go. Yes. So keep your eyes peeled. We will be back doing a Super Bowl breakdown because we are the DFS show that will stick with you all year long. Thank you guys for watching. Hit us with a like. Also, thank you to Fantasy Draft for supporting the show. Make sure to use promo code Contrary on fantasydraft.com or when downloading the Fantasy Draft app for $5 free with any deposit. It's a good time to jump in there. As you know, as Alex mentioned, build your bankroll, play some different sites, diversify, get in there now. But we appreciate every one of you for watching, and we'll see you guys soon for the Super Bowl. So good luck.
Good show, guys.